Good morning, boys and girls. This is Mrs. Wilder. Today is Tuesday, April 7th, 2020, and we are still reading On My Honor. This is chapter 11. Joel lay waiting. He stared into the darkness until his eyes ached, straining to see, to hear, though he didn't know what he was waiting for. When he heard a sound at last, the soft swish of automobile tires on pavement, the hollow thud of doors closing, muted voices, he stood and moved quickly to his window. A car had stopped in front of the Zabrinskys' house, and two men were walking up to their front door. Joe gasped, "Police!" The men were police officers. The teenage boy must have reported him after all. He tried to pull his jeans on over his pajamas, but his foot got tangled in the fabric. He kicked the jeans out of his way and hurtled down the stairs. He had to explain. If the police found out from Mr. and Mrs. Zabrinsky about the lie he had told, the front door was locked, and he lost precious seconds fiddling with it, jerking the lock this way and that until the door finally sprang toward him, and he pushed the screen door out of his way. But at the edge of the porch, he stopped, caught his balance on the top step. Across the street, Mr. Zabrinsky stood silhouetted in his front doorway, talking to the officers. Behind him, Tony's mother moved through the lighted hall toward the front door and the cluster of men. Joel's stomach twisted. He was too late. He turned to go back inside, but the door opened, and his father stepped onto the porch, buttoning a short-sleeved shirt. Joel looked to see if his mother was coming too, but she wasn't. She must have already gone to sleep. "Come on, son," his father said. "Let's see if there's anything we can do." Excuse me. "No," Joel wanted to whisper, to shout. "I'm not going over there." Not a single sound came out of his mouth, though, and when his father put a hand on his shoulder, he seemed to lose all capacity to resist. He turned and walked with his father toward the Zabrinsky's house. "Here's the boy who was with Tony," Mr. Zabrinsky was saying as Joel and his father joined the officers on the porch. Mr. Zabrinsky spoke without inflection. All the life seemed to have been squeezed out of his voice. The two policemen pivoted simultaneously to face Joel, their eyes shadowed by the visors of their caps, their mouths set lines. One of them held a plastic bag from which he had drawn Tony's pale blue shirt. Joel stepped backward, but his father held an arm behind him. Joel couldn't tell if his father was protecting him or preventing him from running away. "What have you found?" his father asked. "The boy's clothes," the officer holding the shirt said. "By the river. His bike, too." Joel stole a glimpse at Tony's mother. She was swaying, her hands pressed against her face. Did she know the truth? Did she know he had been there? That he had seen it all? He couldn't tell. "Did you know Tony went down to the river, Joel?" Mr. Zabrinsky asked in the same lifeless voice he had used at first. "No," Joel said. "I didn't know anything. I got tired, like I told you. They were all looking at him, the police officers, Tony's parents, his father, staring." Again, Joel started to back away. And again, his father's arm prevented him from doing so. The slight pressure of the arm along his back made him want to strike out, to break away and run. If he could get away, he could hide someplace where those terrible eyes couldn't follow. Why had he come back from Starved Rock? He couldn't seem to remember. "Okay," he said, "okay. Tony said he was going to go swimming. I tried to stop him. I told him the river was dangerous." "And did you see him go into the water?" one of the officers asked, stepping closer to Joel. The other one moved in closer too, asking, "Were you there?" "No," Joel cried. "No. Nobody's blaming you, son," the first officer said. "But the more you can tell your friend's parents," he indicated the Zabrinskys with one hand, as though directing Joel's attention to a picture or a statue in the doorway there, "the easier it will be. It's the not knowing that's the worst." "Please," Mrs. Zabrinsky whispered, "if you know anything." Mr. Zabrinsky leaned against the doorframe, one massive fist pressed tightly against his mouth, weeping silently. "Joel," his father said, "you've got to tell us." And then he turned to the others and added, laying his arm heavily across Joel's shoulders, "Joel is an honorable boy. He'll tell you what he knows." "Honorable?" Joel staggered beneath the weight of his father's arm, then pulled away, teetering on the edge of the porch. The five faces bent toward him were like five pale moons, but it was his father's face that loomed the largest. He took a deep breath. Tony wanted to climb the bluffs at Starved Rock, and I was scared to do it. So when he changed his mind, when he decided to go swimming instead, I thought, he was shaking all over as he spoke. I looked for him when he went under. I tried to find him, but I couldn't. He just disappeared. Oh, Joel. The arm that had been holding him didn't reach out to touch him again. Joel, his father repeated. Mr. Zabrinsky moaned and stepped backward into the shadowy hall. Tony's mother stood perfectly still. She didn't look at her husband. She stared only at Joel, her face twisted and ugly. Everybody was looking at him, blaming him. He wanted to turn away, to run at last, but his feet refused to carry him in that direction. Instead, he stumbled toward his father, his hands raised and clenched into fists. I hate you, he cried, pounding at his father's chest. It's all your fault. You never should have let me go. His father said nothing, did nothing to shield himself from Joel's fists. He simply stood there, absorbing the force of the blows, until Joel could bear it no longer. He turned and leaped off the porch and bolted across the street. But even as he slammed through the door and ran up the stairs to his room, he knew it wasn't his father he hated. It wasn't his father at all. He was the one. Tony had died because of him. So that's the end of chapter 11, and I will be reading the last chapter, chapter 12, here very soon. Okay, I'll see you in a little bit, Grigsby Gators. Have a good morning.